G'day everyone, this is a series on computer vision for the real world, and here we'll be focusing on the engineering solutions. We'll be using computer vision as a tool rather than looking at the exact software. Hope to do this with projects and stepping through all the problems that we'll be facing. However, this video is an introduction to the overall theory we will be applying throughout the series. This is a presentation I've done a few times before, and I thought it'd be good to share it with everyone. The title is Managing Uncertainty and the Internet of Things. Now, we'll be talking about deploying many systems and running for long periods of time. To do this, we need to know what to be aware of. So, I guess a bit about myself before getting into the presentation. I've been doing computer vision for the last 7 years. I'm a systems engineer and I've been involved in the entire life cycle of projects, from writing requirements, specifications, designing and building, all the way through to testing and validating systems. I've had experience in many industries. So I've worked with, just as from the slides, manufacturing, defense, agriculture, and transport. And I guess where my focus is going to be on is using information to drive the system. So, a bit about what we're going to be covering in this presentation as an overview. We're going to be looking at the idea of making decisions. So, we design for making decisions and the information we need to support those decisions. That is the fundamentals of what we're going to be looking at. So from the diagram that we can see below, we are going to be the supervisory system or the overlooking system, looking at all the different subsystems. So we may have many systems below us. Each of these systems are going to be making decisions and they're going to need information. And we're going to be making different decisions on how we need these systems to work, and we're going to try and get information from those systems. So I guess automation is really what we're looking to achieve, and we're going to be using a lot of, system architectures. In the next slide, we're going to be talking about information systems. So this means we're going to be focusing on information to make decisions. Whether you're a robot or a human, it does not matter. The outcome of a good information system is automation. I hope we've all seen a little bit about the Internet of Things. However, I'll give you a different perspective and my rundown on when it's most appropriate. There are two ways to look at any process. They can either be in series or parallel. I look at IoT as a parallel system. You can either have one expensive, good quality system, or we can have many smaller, cheaper systems working together. I guess why would you want many smaller, cheaper systems working together? We'll be getting into this later on, but it comes down to the idea of how context affects information. Other than IoT, the other part of this presentation I'll be covering is uncertainty. In terms of information systems for decision making for humans or for robots, uncertainty is what causes these systems to malfunction. We'll be focusing on a type of uncertainty, and that is classification. So I'll hide myself for this bit, but we should be able to see a black box and a white box. And if I show you more boxes, you should be able to tell me whether they are black or white. However, what if I was to show a grey box? How do we classify it? Our system only knows of black or white. So do we classify it as a black box or do we classify it as a white box? And this depends on how the task is set up and what you're most interested in. In this case, we may want to give us an alert or just ignore the values. But to do this, we need to teach it this separate state. However, we still have the same problem between our new states. And here it depends on the task we've set up. As an example, are we interested in what is black or are we interested in what is not white? We can say this dark grey box is either black or grey, but we know it is not white. We only know this because we've defined what grey is. Now this problem appears in many different shapes and forms, but we're really going to be looking into the design elements around it. So we're going to be having a bit of fun, and we're going to be looking at human vision and machine vision. And I guess we're going to really understand why machines struggle to do such simple tasks, but also why it makes it quite strong. So I want you to have a look at this image, and I want you to think about what it might be. Now, we should be able to agree that it's not very clear what it is, but I hope we can, I guess agree that, it's really unclear. The best guess I've had is a 21, but I guess we'll keep going. Now look at this image. Should be much clearer. Now, focusing on, I guess, this part up here, we should be able to agree on this one that there is a vehicle here. Now, showing you this, would you have guessed that it's the same pixels as in the last slide? Now, what's happening here is what we saw in the first slide is how a machine will analyze that image. We as humans will use the entire image, and this is context. The idea of using context to really, I guess, pull in all the amount of information we can and then make a decision on what there is. However, in machine vision, we typically only look at the pixels that are available. So we'll only look at the pixels around a vehicle and try and decide, is this a vehicle or not? So looking deeper into human vision, very good at dealing with variations and change, very good at filling in missing information. However, we're not so good at being exact. And I've got some optical illusions down here just to show you. So there's the bottom one, which has got, I guess, there's two shades of grey. Now, our eye is looking at that as two shades of grey. However, they're in fact the same colour. And there's a trick in the middle that's being applied that'll trick our brain to think that. Just the one above it with the two orange dots, the orange dot on the right will appear bigger than the orange dot on the left. However, again, they are the same size. So our brain does tend to fill in these bits of information and make assumptions. So with machine vision, really fast at inspections and finding anomalies, the results are always consistent. However, it's bad at dealing with variation. So if you've got a machine vision system, it really needs to be consistent. Now, what's nice about this is that human vision is really bad at consistent, boring tasks with fine detail. However, machine vision is actually really quite good at it. So the last one I'll just add in is machine learning. So with machine learning, we're able to, I guess, adaptively learn more about what is going on in the data. So this idea of data-driven or information-driven systems. So this allows for a system to improve over time. Now with machine learning, you need a lot of data, is typically the downside. But once you've gathered this data, you can in fact start learning more about this contextual information. So, as an overview, human vision for dealing with variation and decision making, machine vision for well-defined repetitive tasks, machine learning to highlight changes and anomalies. Now, the biggest mistake I guess I see is I see a lot of people trying to replace human vision tasks with machine vision and dealing with highly variable, highly kind of uncertain data. Now, there are ways that you can separate the task that I'll be going to a bit later where the human can deal with the variable task and the machine can deal with the repetitive, consistent task. So this last point at the bottom is, information is just an extension of the human body. There are tools to assist us with this, but information just helps us do what we're going to be doing. Don't try and think of it as a replacement. So what we'll start is we'll do the dot points on the left and then we'll go into the diagram on the right, but we're going to look at what is an information system. What is information? What makes up information? And how do we assess information? So the objective of all information systems is to be contextless and timeless. This means if you, will say, have a sensor and you're taking some readings, it will work today, it will work tomorrow, it will work the same accuracy in the next 10 years, 100 years, in fact forever. This system is timeless. It does not matter when it is to work, it will always perform what we would expect it to perform. Now, context being where, so if we take some readings here, and we'll say a temperature reading, and then we go somewhere else, we don't expect it to be dependent on the environment or linked to anything. We should be able to take some temperature readings somewhere and then move it somewhere else. Now, vision, this is always very complex. It's really about the environment you're in. So, to assess contextless and timeless, we now have the next three. So, validity. Are we using the right technology for the right task? Are we trying to measure the temperature with a ruler? So I hope we all expect that to give very poor results because you're almost random results. So if you choose the wrong technology, you get this almost randomized or this very low accuracy, which is the next dot point. So once you've got the right technology, you've now got this idea of accuracy. How well has the system performed the desired task? How often is it getting it wrong? Now, one of the biggest mistakes I see is accuracy is a measurement of what has previously occurred. So you can only assess a system by what it has previously seen. In order to take, I guess, a system from the past and push it into the future and get that still same high accuracy, you need to make sure that the environment it was taken in and all the environmental factors that made it give that accuracy is taken into the future. And this is quality control. So what do we need to control in the environment in order to get that high accuracy and continue that into the future? So that's how we assess, I guess, information systems. Now, this diagram on the right, what we have here is what makes up information. So there are people, process, environment, and technology. As I said in the first few slides, we are focusing on decision making. So people and process are making decisions. Information is going to support them and their decisions to be more accurate or better. Now, what makes up information is on the bottom left, environment and technology. So information is just taking some readings in an environment with the technology. Now, linking it to the dot points on the left, technology is linked to validity and quality control is linked to environment. So this is really what makes up information. So try and remember that diagram, but we're going to be, I guess, referring back to it later. So we're going to be now talking about uncertainty. And I guess we've been talking about this idea of context and how important it is for systems to be very high accuracy, and if they're linked to context, how we need to control that. Now, if you're going to be, we'll say, buying a system, a vision system, and you really need to start articulating what you need in that system, what you tend to find is this idea of context comes under tacit knowledge. Now, for those who aren't familiar with tacit knowledge is something that is really hard to communicate. It's something that we almost just sense and feel. You can't write it down as a specification. Can't put in a requirement. It becomes very tricky. So what we're proposing and using more and more is this idea to use information to drive requirements. Now, that idea is that information is going to have embedded in it context. So what we do is, I guess, we have this, I guess, iterative design process. So, which I've just got down the bottom here. Now, the way this works is you start with a simple system. You might identify a technology. You will gather some information. That'll define the system that you need, and then you build it. So as an example, you would start with the decisions that are needed to be made. What decisions do I need to make, and what information do I need? Great, what technology can I use? So we'll say we're using vision, so we'll set up a simple system. So I've had guys, in manufacturing, for example, get their phones out and just start taking some samples from their phone. Start taking some readings, and then they'll send us that. We'll now be able to use that information to assess what the environment is, what they're trying to do, and then we can start defining what they need in order to reach their goals. We can then build the system, and then we can now work on the next iteration and go, well, okay, system works to what is needed. You've hit that first set of goals. Now, how do we make it better? And then again, it keeps iterating. Now, people do not like an iterative process because it's ongoing. They never feel that it'll ever achieve what they want. In the reality, this is typically a much cheaper way of working. Now, a typical way this process might work is essentially we really don't go past 3 or 4 iterations. So the first iteration is typically getting the hardware right, making sure the hardware is correct. Once the hardware is correct, how do we improve the accuracy? Once the accuracy is improved, then we can identify most of the problems that we can easily solve. Then it goes into quality control. How do we control the environment and work, and how to keep moving? So first, I guess, goal is validity. Second is accuracy. Third is quality control. And that's really how this system works. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the infrastructure and other elements that really support this kind of philosophy or technology. So things like connectivity. So when you're designing a system, thinking about, do we use Wi-Fi, do we use LAN, do we use WAN, or do we use LTE, 4G? Is it possible that there are ways we can use the low power wide area networks like LoRa? So typically with vision, you would have something connected to the internet is easiest to get access, or no connectivity. Now that's where you got your high bandwidth data for your Wi-Fi or your LAN networks. Your WAN, you typically want as a standalone or remote system away from a facility. Now, to do this, you need to make sure you check coverage in the location before deployment. The last one is low power WAN, low power wide area networks. So this will increase coverage from the base station. So rather than for Wi-Fi, you have to put repeaters every 100 meters or so. You can get up to 7 kilometers within an urban environment. You can if your sampling's okay every 15 minutes, and battery life will last up to 10 years once it's deployed. So what's really powerful about this is to sense environmental conditions. So you might want to sense things like light levels, temperatures, humidities, understanding how different environments work. You can really do that with every 15-minute sampling. So the next one is data storage. What are you storing? Are you storing it in the cloud? Are you storing it on site? Are you storing it on the device? Are you backing up information? I guess, is this, how are you backing up information? How much do you need to back up? What will affect operational conditions? And the last one is data processing. Do you process data, on the device? Do you process data on site? Do you process it in the cloud? Do you do a combination of all three? Do you process most of what you know on the device? And then I guess what we're doing more and more is, as we're not sure about what we're looking at, it gets sent out to the cloud and processed somewhere else. So the IT supporting systems. So I guess looking at the idea of, now that we've got the infrastructure in place, how are we compressing the data? What do we need to compress? If we're using a lot of machine learning, do we have to save every sample, or is there a way we can hold the information we're interested in and get rid of things that aren't needed? How do we visualize data? Now that we have a way that we have information or data, how do we actually view it? Do people have access to it who need it? Or do we only have these data silos that are created that only a few people can access, and it's kind of useless? With data accessibility, can we start with a manual system and then integrate automation in, and is the data that we have available human readable but also machine readable? Like, it's easily programmable. Bandwidth allocation, if you're using the cloud, how much do we have to upload to the cloud? How much of it do we need to? Do you have one system that's uploading huge amounts of data, and you've got all these other systems that aren't, and it's really not balanced? The last one, which is also incredibly important, is cybersecurity. So there's the UL standard, so 2900 series for devices and, I guess, business processes and how they work together. Now, in terms of cybersecurity, I guess there's two main questions you've got to ask, or you have to do a risk assessment on. First one is, what happens if someone just deletes all your information? Just gets on and just deletes everything. What is that risk? Second one is analyzing the threat if someone is looking at your information. Do you have secret bits that you don't want others to look at? And there's kind of a third one there, but it really depends what you're doing, is what happens if someone comes on and starts synthetically generating the data? So it's not real. What will happen? So, looking into the future, so I've just got a picture from Wikipedia on Industry 4.0, or talking about connectivity. Now, in order to, I guess, this idea of how to survive in the future, or how to make your processes survive in the future, I've got three main dot points there. So the first one is seeing the value in information. So seeing that information will add value to what you have. Not that it will give you a direct benefit straight away, but monitoring the temperature of the room, again, might not seem very interesting, but what will that mean for other systems? And this comes to the next dot point. Everything needs to work together. Rather than having these black box systems that are placed out there, completely sealed, no one knows what they're doing, you need to start figuring out how to get data out of these systems, and again, how can other systems start using this data? Third one is you need to make sure the infrastructure is there to support it. So if you're going to be using Wi-Fi, you're going to be using your wide area networks, making sure that the infrastructure is there, and can you manage that? I guess something that wasn't really mentioned was, if you've got many wide area network devices, you've now got all these SIM cards you need to manage. That's now another hassle, another failure point that can go wrong. So once you've done these three dot points, I would say you've now opened up all the different technologies below. Your process or your business now can start looking into many other areas. So I've got an example, I guess the iterative process that I described earlier. I've got a bit of an example on how this might look, and this was one of the first projects I worked on. So what we did was, we had a customer come, and they had a manual process. So they were interested in how many vehicles were in a video file. So a customer would come to them and say, here's a video file, 24 hours long. Can you tell me how many trucks went by? Can you tell me how many vehicles there are? So they said, we want to automate this process. We want it to be fully automated, 99% accuracy, go. Now, this is where we're kind of going. Do you want to pass us any video in any lighting condition, showing any camera angle, and we're going to tell you where the vehicles are? And we've kind of, and you need this to a 99% accuracy. So what we did was, we went through and go, okay, what decisions do you need to make? You need to know what vehicles are there. You need to know what type they are. And we started to go, okay, great. Let's now separate, first step, separating the human vision part and the machine vision part. So what we did was, we now started, I guess, with a motion detector. So we would make sure that we wouldn't miss any motion. If a motion, they would set up the interface, and then as a piece of motion would cross a line, our system would just take a snapshot and put that in a folder. Now, we achieved the 90% accuracy just by going motion and saying, look, just grab motion, put it in this folder. And what the operator would do next is they would go through and count the images. So what the operator would then be looking for is, is there anything wrong that shouldn't be in there, and then ignoring it, or they would make those final decisions. So once we built this system and got them to start testing it, they thought this was, I guess, it would take a 24-hour long task now down to a 2-hour long task. So again, it's not perfect, but there's a significant amount of saving that has occurred. So they started noticing there was some very common problems with the software. The first one was we had duplicates. So it would take 2 shots of vehicles. So there'd be 2 photos of the same vehicle. There'd be many blank frames. So there'd be shots taken and there wouldn't be a vehicle or any motion that was actually there. So what we started to do then was go, okay, great. Let's now start looking at some machine learning and going, well, once we've looked at the entire video, can we actually classify the difference between 2 vehicles that are very close to each other, and can we remove the one that is, if it's the same vehicle? So if there's 2 vehicles, or is there 1 vehicle that's been taken twice? Now, we had to look at the entire video for this because we couldn't, because the camera could be from any angle, we couldn't tell whether, from the position of the camera, whether vehicles would be closer together. We couldn't set a hard threshold value in time. So the second one was, can we tell the difference between background and a vehicle? And that one was a bit easier, I guess, with machine learning, but we were able to tell whether something was there or whether it was just background. And again, once the video was complete, we now had a lot of data to process and figure that out. So we were able to get the system to a 95% accuracy after this point. Now, this now took their 2-hour long task down to like a 1-hour task, a 1.5 hour task. So what we then started to do was go, well, they now started realizing, great, we've now got this accuracy to what we want, or better, we want it to get to 99. How do we get this system to 99? And what they started to do is they'd have their list of when the system was failing and constant reasons. And what they started realizing was it was mostly now due to the type of video. So there would be certain angles the camera would be, and that would cause some problems. Certain other angles that would happen would cause other problems. And, nighttime would cause different problems. Daytime would have other problems. And it wasn't very much precise to the entire system anymore. So some examples of that was you'd have trucks go past, and it would be at a point where the sun would reflect from the truck into the camera, and all the parameters would change on the camera. Now, that's okay if you're just looking at the video, but for our system is we would detect motion. We'd go, well, there's motion everywhere now. So that's only one instance. There's instances of, perfectly still image, and then suddenly the wind will start blowing and the camera will start to bob. And there are certain types of how this camera would bob, and most of the time it would be kind of rotational. Sometimes it would be translation, and again, it was very up to the situation. So rather than developing software for all these individual parts, which would be costing them a bit of money, they then started to realize, why don't we now, for the customers who need this accuracy, or we need to have this for, because we need more than 24 hours of footage, let's set up the hardware. So what they'd do is they'd set the hardware up so that way they wouldn't get any of these problems. So this is now getting into the quality control elements. So what can we do to make sure that these environmental factors won't affect the system? So they started going out and putting up the hardware, setting up so that so that the camera parameters were consistent. They would not change if a truck would go past very quickly. So from that, they were able to achieve their 99% accuracy using the software that we had developed. So this is, I guess, an idea of how that example, that philosophy kind of goes with the iterating processes. So it's something not to be scared of, I guess, if you're trying to do it, but it's very much really understanding what decisions need to be made and what the information needs to support those decisions. So you don't do iterations where there isn't any benefit, or you're paying a lot of money for a very small amount of gain that is not necessary. So I'll just hide my face just to show this was the interface we designed. So It's quite complex but we taught their operators to use it, and it was in a language that was, I guess, best for them. So yeah, some concluding thoughts. So I guess if there's anything you're going to take away from this presentation, please take these notes. So first of all, work on a level of decision making. What decisions do we need to make, and then what information do we need to support those decisions? Then, humans deal with variable conditions and decision making. Then machines assist humans not miss any critical information, and machine learning to continuously improve and understand the system that you're working with. So, I hope you've learned something from this. Now, if you've got any questions, comments, feel free to ask them in the video. Subscribe if you've learnt something. Give us a like if you enjoyed it. And again, any criticism also open to talk about. So keep free to keep the conversation going, and thank you for watching.